There is a liquid sitting on a dusty shelf in almost every hardware store that costs less than a cup of coffee. Yet it can do something body shops charge thousands of dollars for. Not hundreds. Thousands. We're talking about the kind of damage most car owners believe is irreversible. Faded paint that has turned chalky white under years of brutal sun. Clear coat peeling away like burned skin. Surfaces so rough and lifeless that even touching them feels like running your hand across dry concrete. And the moment you notice it, you already know what comes next. A quote. $2,500, $3,000, sometimes even $5,000 just to make your car look presentable again. But what if that entire assumption is wrong? What if the damage you're seeing isn't the end of your paint, but just the surface telling a very different story? Because here's something almost nobody tells you. That dull, oxidized layer on your car isn't dead. It hasn't failed in the way you've been led to believe. It's fractured. And fractures can be repaired. Not with expensive tools. Not with sanding machines or professional spray booths, but with a simple liquid that most people walk past without a second glance. This isn't a theory. It's not some experimental trick buried in a lab. It's something that has been used quietly, repeatedly, and with results so dramatic they almost look fake. Cars that looked completely beyond saving, restored in under an hour. Surfaces that seemed permanently ruined, brought back to a deep, reflective shine. And once it's done, it doesn't wash off in the rain. It doesn't fade in a few weeks. It stays. So the real question isn't whether this works. The real question is, why haven't you heard about it? Because if a $3 solution can replace a $3,000 service, then every second you don't know about it is costing you money. And by the end of this video, you're going to see exactly why this simple liquid changes everything you thought you knew about paint damage, and why the industry built on fixing it would prefer you never find out. Because once you see it, you can't unsee it. A solution that cheap, that simple, and that effective doesn't just fix paint. It threatens an entire ecosystem built around the idea that you can't fix it yourself. Think about it. The global auto body industry generates tens of billions of dollars every single year, and a massive portion of that revenue doesn't come from accidents or structural damage. It comes from appearance, faded panels, oxidized clear coat, cosmetic restoration. The kind of work that feels necessary, but only because you've been taught there's no alternative. Now imagine what happens when that belief collapses. If a car owner can walk into a hardware store, spend a few dollars, and restore their own paint in a driveway, what happens to the shops that rely on that job? What happens to the systems designed to keep you coming back every few years? Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Permanent solutions don't build repeat customers. And without repeat customers, there is no sustainable service model, no steady cash flow, no industry at scale. So the solution doesn't need to be banned. It doesn't need to be illegal. It just needs to be invisible. And that's exactly what happened. Not through some dramatic shutdown or headline-making cover-up, but through something far more effective: silence. It's never mentioned in technician training. It's not recommended in dealerships. It doesn't appear in mainstream repair guides. Instead, generations of car owners are taught a single narrative. Once your paint starts to fail, your only option is to sand it down and start over. Strip it, rebuild it, pay for it, again and again. Even the products sold to restore your paint are designed within that same system. They promise quick results, temporary shine, just enough improvement to give you hope, but not enough to last. Weeks later, the damage returns, often worse than before. And when that happens, the conclusion feels obvious. I guess this can't be fixed. But that conclusion isn't accidental. It's engineered. Because the most powerful way to control a market isn't to stop a solution from existing. It's to make sure nobody believes it works. And once you understand that, everything starts to shift. The question is no longer whether the industry knows about this. It's how long it is known, and how much depends on you never finding out. So if it's not magic, what is it actually doing? Because the moment you strip away the mystery, what you're left with is something far more unsettling. Real science that has been hiding in plain sight this entire time. When your car's paint begins to fade, it doesn't simply die. Under a microscope, the surface tells a completely different story. Years of ultraviolet radiation don't erase the coating, they break it. The clear coat develops a network of microscopic fractures, tiny channels spreading across the surface like invisible cracks in glass. To your eyes, it looks like chalky, lifeless paint. But at the molecular level, it's something else entirely. A damaged structure that is still there, still intact, just waiting to be restored. Now here's where everything changes. A properly formulated liquid, thin enough, precise enough, doesn't sit on top of that damage like wax or polish. It doesn't mask it. It doesn't temporarily fill it. Instead, it moves. Drawn in by capillary action, the same force that pulls water through the smallest fibers, the liquid seeps deep into those microscopic channels. Not across the surface, but inside it. And once there, something even more powerful happens. As the solvent evaporates, the remaining resin begins to cross-link, bonding not only with itself, but with the original polymer structure of the paint. What you're left with isn't a layer sitting on top. It's a reconstruction from within. A surface that regains depth, gloss, and integrity because it has been physically reconnected at the molecular level. That's why the results don't wash away. That's why the shine doesn't fade after a few weeks. Because this isn't cosmetic, it's structural. And once you understand that, the entire narrative starts to fall apart. Because if the damage is reversible, if the surface can be rebuilt instead of replaced, then everything you've been told about dead paint suddenly doesn't hold up anymore. So let me ask you something, honestly. Before hearing this, did you believe oxidized paint could ever be restored without sanding or repainting? Or did you, like most people, assume it was permanently gone the moment it turned dull and white? Drop your answer in the comments, because what you believed before this moment says a lot about how powerful that narrative really is. And if this still sounds too good to be true, that's exactly where the data becomes impossible to ignore. Because this isn't just a theory built on one story or one dramatic before and after. Controlled tests have already been done, and the results are not even close. In one study, identical automotive panels were exposed to years of simulated UV damage until they reached the exact condition most people would call beyond saving. Completely dull, chalky, fractured across the entire surface. Then two different approaches were applied. On one side, a traditional rubbing compound, the same type sold in auto parts stores everywhere. On the other, a diluted acrylic copolymer resin. After just a single application and a short curing period, the difference was staggering. The resin-treated panels recovered the vast majority of their original gloss, deep, reflective, almost factory-like. The rubbing compound panels? A temporary improvement, yes, but nowhere near the same level. And within months, that improvement was gone, washed away by weather and sunlight as if it had never happened. Meanwhile, the resin-treated surfaces held their finish, not for weeks, but for years, with no measurable degradation. Now scale that beyond the lab. Real vehicles, real conditions. Delivery vans, work trucks, cars that lived outside every single day under harsh weather. The same pattern repeated. High recovery, long-term stability, minimal cost. When you put those results side by side with the price of a professional respray, the gap isn't just big, it's almost unbelievable. A few dollars in material versus thousands in labor. Minutes of application versus days in a shop. So what do you actually do with this information? This is where it becomes real, because the solution isn't hidden behind a paywall or locked inside some specialized supplier. It's sitting in plain sight. Walk into a hardware store and head to the section with sealers and coatings. What you're looking for is a clear acrylic copolymer resin, often labeled as a concrete sealer or acrylic coating. The key is in the ingredients. You want a product where the primary component is acrylic polymer or acrylic copolymer resin, not silicone, not wax, not petroleum-based fillers. Those are designed for short-term shine. This is different. This is the same type of chemistry that allows the liquid to penetrate and rebuild from within. The process itself is almost deceptively simple. Start by washing the vehicle thoroughly. Use something strong enough to strip away any wax or residue so the surface is completely bare. Dry it fully. Then apply a small amount of the resin using a foam applicator pad, working one panel at a time with slow, even strokes. At first, it may look cloudy or milky. That's normal. It means the liquid is actively interacting with the damaged surface. Let it sit for several minutes as it begins to settle and bond. Then gently buff it with a clean microfiber cloth. And as you do, watch what happens. The color comes back. The depth returns. The surface that looked completely finished begins to look alive again. Repeat the process for a second coat. In more severe cases, a third coat after full curing can make an even bigger difference. And once it's done, leave it undisturbed for proper curing, because that's when the real transformation locks in. But here's the part most people don't expect. This doesn't feel like using a product. It feels like discovering something you were never supposed to know. Because once you've seen the result with your own eyes, the entire system around you starts to look different. The quotes, the recommendations, the only option you were given. It all begins to feel incomplete. So now it's your turn. If this opened your eyes even a little, support the channel, because this is exactly what we do here. We take the knowledge that gets buried, ignored, or quietly pushed aside, and bring it back into the light where it belongs. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and share this with someone who's about to spend thousands on something they might not need to. And stay with me, because in the next video, we're going even deeper. Not just restoring what's damaged, but revealing another simple system hiding in plain sight that can save you hundreds every single year. Once you see it, you'll never look at everyday problems the same way again.